Hey everybody, welcome to another episode of the LitRPG podcast. I'm Ramon Mejia. I'm here to bring you the latest LitRPG news, reviews, and author interviews. This week it's episode number 226 of the show, 7th week of the quarantine mustache experiment. It's finally filling out, looking pretty manly, although some people have called it the villainous goatee look. So I'm like, oh, a little bit here, a little bit here, a little bit there. All villain. I could be the evil villain version of Ramon. You don't know. This week I have 4 new reviews for you folks at home. That's going to include Bio Dungeon, Symbiote, The Body Dungeons, book number 1. Also, The Forest Cultivation, The Heavenly Throne, book number 1. And Cryo, a Fantasy LitRPG, Lord of Valeria, book number 1. And as a guest review, we have Charles Dean, author of a bunch of books like The Bath of Night, Merton Tikba, the Heroic Villain, War Eternus, all kinds of stuff. And he's actually going to be reviewing The Mechanical Crafter, book number 1, the book that I wrote and published recently. And, well, I'll read all those off to you. But before we get any of that, we'll go into LitRPG news. And in LitRPG news, we're going to begin with a story for S.R. Rowland, author of the Sentence to Troll series. He's actually combined the first 3 books in that series into an omnibus or a book set for you to enjoy at a discounted price. And for the next couple of weeks, it'll be 99 cents. That's right, you're going to get for 99 cents 3 full, not short, LitRPG novels. I believe that's almost, I'm going to say at least 9 to 1,000 pages for that. And again, this is a very sweet deal. If you haven't had a chance to read this series, this is a perfect time to get it. It's 99 cents and it's a ton of great reading. So definitely go check it out. Also in LitRPG news, book 4 in the Chaos Emperor series just got published this week, and the author is giving away book 1 in the series for free. So if you want to go check that out, feel free to do so. No huge investment. It's a free first book. That's for the Chaos Emperor series. Also, S.R. Rowland, author of the Sentence to Troll series, has merch for you to buy. He put up a t-shirt that is being produced by the company called, I think it's Inksoft. We'll link in the show notes for you. And from the author's Facebook post, it says, thanks to the fine folks at ShirtKong, you can pick up this bad boy for the next 30 days. Go to my website or Facebook for the link. These guys have been awesome in supporting local businesses during COVID-19, offering free designs and $10 for every shirt sold to the business without any upfront cost. So he said this is going to be a temporary sale until the merchandise is all sold out. But pretty good looking shirt there, I got to say. So if you want to help support the author, or just if you're a fan and you want to get some good merch, there we go. We have a link in the show notes. You can also go to the author's Facebook page, of course, and website for links as well. Okay, in other LitRPG news, Seymour Kuznets, author of Earth Legacy, the Earth Force book, and also the Life Reset series, which is also super popular. He's asking his fans for help. He says that Earth Force book 1, Audible, is being produced wide. It is a novel that is because good for all. I'll just read what he says. Clarification about Earth Force 1, Audible. Some Theater, the guys who did Life Reset books, will re-record Earth Force 1 and then do book 2. In order for them to do that, I had to stop Audible exclusivity, write for that book, and go with a wide distribution. That procedure makes it look like the audiobook on their site went through a relaunch, but it's the exact same audiobook as before. New link below. Anyone who purchased the original book should still have it available to them. The re-recording of book number 1 is estimated to be released around August and will only be available on the SBTL audiobook platform. However, because of that, all the reviews were deleted. And so he'd appreciate that if you could repost a quick review, if you rated it or if you gave a review. Otherwise, it looks like he only has like 3 reviews for that very popular and good story there. So we'll link in the show notes for you. If you click on the Audible link for it, you can actually see, it almost has like, I think it's 0.5 reviews, but it's been out and it had a ton of reviews before. So if you listened to it and you liked it enough to review it the first time, please go back and put your review so that the author can share his story with people. Okay, in other LitRPG news, we have an updated reminder for a deadline for a what's called an anthology series. Jeffrey Falkenlog was nice enough to remind us that any aspiring authors or authors who want to submit a short story for the Tales of Dungeons volume, I think it's 3 at this point, that the deadline for submissions are on May the 20th, so only a scant few days away. So if you want to send him a story, it can be a one-shot, a chapter, or a short story, 2,000 to 20,000 word count. And you can submit it at dungeonanthology@gmail.com. And of course, there are a few other rules there if you want to check those out. We have a link in the show notes for the original post with any other specification that you might be interested in submitting for. Okay, and last bit of LitRPG news, we have a video panel about LitRPG and Gamelit. It was members of the panel. The moderator was Jay Boyce. The guests were going to be Apollo Thorne, Tao Wong, and Charles Dean. And this was for BrambleCon. It's actually it was a Twitch streamed panel on Gamelit and LitRPG. So those good popular LitRPG authors and Gamelit authors talked about what the genre is, the different importance of the genre, their particular works, what inspired them, how crunchy they get, a bunch of other cool stuff. So definitely go check out that stream. We'll link in the show notes for that particular Twitch video for BrambleCon. So there you go. That's all the stuff that, all the news in this section. Now into things that are out now. These are stories that have been published recently. I haven't had a chance to read them yet, but they were out for you to enjoy, including Shattered Sword, also The Emissary Bard World of Chains, book number 3 by Lars. So definitely go check that out. Also Card Mage. I think this is the second book in the series, called Phantom Campaign. The 4th book in the Chaos Emperor series. Also Nothing But Bones, The Wasteland. And the 5th book in the Axe Druid series is also out right now for you to go enjoy. A different story called Windhammer is out for your reading pleasure. And the 2nd book in the Nightmares of Lemire, Janice and the Prince. So there we go. All kinds of new ebooks. Now there's a whole list of new LitRPG audiobooks that came out since last week. Looks like Audible just finally passed through a whole bunch of LitRPG and Gimlet stories for the audiobook, and they approved them, so they all came out at the same time. So this is a much longer list, including the Puppet Master Auto System book number 5. Also Dungeon World book number 5 is out as an audiobook. Also the 4th book in the Arcane Kingdom Online series called Death Match, as is the 1st book in the Tuscan Blade series by Lovell Jackson. Also out as an audiobook is Pearl of the South World of the Change, book number 2. Also The 5th Survivor, episode number 2. Also Varnath, the Black Blade, book number 2 is out as an audiobook as well. The 3rd book in the Crafter's Dilemma, the Dungeon Core novel, Dungeon Crafting. That's all out as an audiobook, as is Endless Fantasy Online, Elk Kingdom, book number 2. Also, World of Karak, book number 2 is out as an audiobook, and Resurrection of Murdoch, Undone, book number 1. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11 LitRPG audiobooks came out this last week for you, and they're all available for you. We'll link in the show notes also on our website, litrpgpodcast.com, where we, on a regular basis, weekly basis, post the new LitRPG ebooks and audiobooks for you to enjoy. Okay, on to upcoming LitRPG. This is where I read off a bunch of stuff that's coming out in the near future, so you can plan your reading schedule or your release schedule for an author. May the 17th, Luminous +4. May 17th as well, Biomedical Self-Engineering, book number 1. May 20th, it'll be Challenger's Call, book number 5. May the 20th, The Alchemist, book number 1, a new book from Vasily Hanko. May 22nd, it'll be the 2nd book in the Space Season series. May 26th, it'll be The Slayers of Heaven, Poor Cultivation, which is a new Russian translation Wuxia LitRPG series. May 28th, The Legendary Dungeon Seed. May 31st, Path of Alchemy, Glorification Emperor, book number 4. On June the 3rd, it'll be The Fairy's Tale, book number 2, written by Cody Whitefall. On June the 4th, it'll be Eric Uglin's 9th entry into the Good Guy series called 4 Beheadings and a Funeral. June the 9th, it'll be Reality Benders, book number 6. June the 12th, it'll be Rise of Omniscience, book number 6. I think that realistically shifted a little bit, but it's called Silver Spear. On June the 26th, it'll be the 3rd book in the Space Season series. On June the 30th as well, it'll be Leagues of Losers, a new book by Michael Antonoff, who's another Russian LitRPG author. On July the 1st, it'll be Stars of Sunder, book number 9 by Tao Wong. July the 8th, The Enchanters, Project Stellar, book number 2. Legends of Online, book number 6 will be out on July the 9th. The second book in the Eternals Online series, we're reviewing book number 1 in the podcast today. The second book in that series will be out on July the 14th, called The Ruined Temple. July the 14th, it'll be Watcher's Question, the second book in the Life in Exile series. July 31st, book 1 of the Vindication 2.0 series. August the 8th, it'll be the fourth book in the Bad Guy series, War of the Posers. August the 18th, Intellectium will be out, and there we go. That's it. All the stuff up to August. There are some other pre-order that are later out there, but I figure August is plenty of time for people to look at their schedule. Okay, on to new releases and reviews. Okay, first up this week is going to be Bio Dungeon Symbiote, The Body's Dungeon, book number 1, written by Jeffrey Falcon-Logue and Jonathan Brooks, two very popular and well-known dungeon core authors. This novel is 364 pages, $3.99. It is available on Kindle Unlimited. Here are the author's description. In the icy north exists a young orphan and a war on a microscopic scale. Martin Hardgrove was orphaned at a young age, forced to live on the streets, and needed to turn to thievery to survive. When a special job assignment to him by the Thieves Guild went awry, the guild leadership punished him with a beating, compelled him to eat dirt and rocks to soothe his hunger, and left him to die in an abandoned mine. Unbeknownst to the young thief, when he was forced to eat that handful of dirt and rocks, he also ended up swallowing a tiny dungeon core. Thrown into a highly unusual world filled with cells, bacteria, and other dangerous pathogens, the tiny dungeon crystal is, at first, confused by his surroundings. After seeing how the different complex systems of the body work together, the crystal is quickly fascinated. It isn't long before he decides that, instead of trying to escape, he wants the body for himself. He wants to possess the living being for his own use as a crystal, wholly unlike anything the world has ever seen before. To get to that point, though, however, the fledgling dungeon crystal has to learn how to survive against the different enemies trying to destroy him. Not only will he have to defeat the hostile pathogens standing in the way of his complete dominion, but he also, as a foreign invader to the body himself, Marston's natural immune system sees the crystal as a threat. The only way to survive is to create his own immune cell defenders and place traps to prevent anything from reaching his dungeon crystal. In short, he has to turn the body into a dungeon. So there we go. This is a very interesting collaborative project between two very well-known LitRPG authors. There's a ton of biology here, and if that's something that you find enjoyable, I think you're really going to love this book. Other people may appreciate the biology and its accuracy, but may not like some of the technical descriptions. But for the most part, if you enjoy Dungeon Core Story, I think you're going to find this one to be interesting enough, just because it does do a little twist on your standard Dungeon Core Story. In this bigger novel, there are two narratives. One is from the human thief's perspective, who on a job that goes wrong, gets thrown into a mine, and accidentally just a dungeon core. He's just trying to survive his punishment and figure out the mystery of who murdered his family and how he can survive the terrible disease that wrecks his body. There's a bit of normal dungeon diving and a plot setup in this narrative. The second narrative structure is from the dungeon core's perspective, where he's inadvertently swallowed by the thief and tries to take over the body as his dungeon. It reminded me of a bit of the Magic School Bus episode where they explore the body. And that's general. I mean, it's not as peppy, but it is educational. There are legitimate descriptions of different bodily functions, different defense mechanisms, different types of cell structures in the body's immune system, defense system, and they're all accurate. It kind of reminds me of an anime, I think it's called Cells, where they kind of make the conflict between microbes and bacteria and viruses versus the body's immune system into a entertaining kind of structure there. And this definitely kind of does that. It doesn't anthropomorphize anything, but it does make them into interesting fights and threats. And there's lots of explanations of various biological functions, types of cells, other parts, various immune system responses. And there's also that same kind of dungeon core story where the core is expanding its influence, fighting off the body's defenses, and learning how to fight off various problems like viruses and bacterial infections by upgrading his own immune cells and his biological traps. So you still get a dungeon core story here. It does just feel a little bit different because the authors are using real biological names and proper terms for things. So it's interesting. Overall, it's an interesting take on this kind of story written by two big names in the genre. Gets a score of 7.5 out of 10. It's a pretty solid story. It's probably not as appealing for people who just want something super fantasy. There is a dungeon core section, dive section from the Feast perspective, which will still be satisfying for people who like that. But as far as a dungeon core story goes, it is a little bit different. And for people who don't like biology, they may not find this appealing. But for me, I enjoy science. I like science. I enjoyed it quite a bit. So it gets kind of middle score of the good section. A 7.5 out of 10 for Bio Dungeon Symbiote, the Body's Dungeon, book number 1. And next we have Forest Cultivation, the Heavenly Throne, book number 1, a LitRPG Wuxia series written by Yuri Ajin. It is 260 pages. It is $3.99. It is available on Kindle Unlimited. Here's the author's description. Learn the true nature of the Force. It's more complicated than you think. He was the champion of underground fighting in this world. He was young, handsome, and rich. Recognized world champions were no match for him. He had her, the love of his life. He had lived for her and for battle. However, in a moment, it was all gone. He lost his life and his name. His dreams were taken away from him. The one he had been in love with since childhood had betrayed him and plunged a knife into his heart. In another world, very different and distant, a young boy lying in a muddy ditch suddenly opens his eyes. A new life has been awakened in his empty body. What will he do with an offer for a second chance at life? Well, what path will Kai follow in a world where power and skill reign supreme? In a world where your worth is determined by your martial arts. So there you go. And there's a small little note saying this is a hit in Russian LitRPG. And it's been translated here. So there we go. So it is what it is. This is a cultivation story with the minor progression elements. It features a main character that is reincarnated into a world that uses cultivation where martial powers equals power. The early to mid story is mostly training as the genius main character grows in power until he enters the tournament. Late story is the final revenge against those in the city that wronged him. There's a little bit of world building and setting up a future storylines here. I couldn't quite enjoy this story, and not because it's bad storytelling, just that the storytelling only has a very small amount of RPG element, and by the middle of the story, a lot of that kind of disappears as it focuses more on cultivation. It does technically have stats, it has classes of cultivation, and it has notifications, and those, there is, like I said, there's small bits of progression, so it is technically LitRPG, but this is mostly a cultivation story with an overpowered main character, and that's perfectly fine. There just weren't enough RPG elements to be interesting, and to kind of quantifiably justify the huge jumps in power. It felt like the RPG elements were there just as reflections of his power instead of actually being a progression system in of itself that made a logical progression term. They were just like the huge spikes in power jumping, and that's definitely in line with the Wuxia cultivation kind of storylines, but it conflicts with the RPG part in my opinion, just because the RPG elements are more game related and they're more like understandable and they're more like something anybody can kind of do when they're playing a video game and when they're playing a tabletop RPG, and that's definitely not quite the case here. Again, the power progression is more along the lines of like huge spikes that you find in Wuxia and Cultivation, which is perfectly cool if you want that kind of story and you enjoy that. For me, when I'm reading LitRPG, I kind of want something a little more towards the gamer side, that makes story sense, and it's a hard balance to kind of find in some stories. So for this one, it just leaned a little too much towards the Wuxia Cultivation. Not that I don't enjoy those, it's just that I don't enjoy them as much as LitRPG, which is perfectly cool. The story does not work for me, however. If you are a bigger fan of Cultivation or Wuxia, you probably enjoy this more than I did. But for me, it gets a score of 6 out of 10. Again, that's not a negative score necessarily for me. It is one that says, this doesn't work for me, but it might work for you. And there you go. So, the Forest Cultivation, the Heavenly Throne, book number 1, with a score of 6 out of 10. And next we have Cryo, a fantasy LitRPG, Lords of Valeria, book number 1, written by Tim Johnson, 319 pages, $4.99, available on Kindle Unlimited. Here's the author's description. Bailed from Cryo jail under mysterious circumstances, Christian Lawson is drawn into the game world of Valeria, only to be enslaved by the world's power-mad tyrant. Forced to fight and to level to serve the tyrant's will, Christian fights back to gain his freedom. He finds hope in another player from Earth, the poison-wielding ranger Alexia, a powerful but eccentric witch, and the new abilities awaken inside him. Long held bound in darkness and cold, he learns to unleash the powers of ice against his enemies. Together they must escape the clutches of their captors and find Christian's lost uncle, the leader of a desperate rebellion, to save not only Valeria, but Earth itself. So there you go. And all that is very accurate as far as the plotting goes. This is a transported to a game world, a story where the main character gets a class that specializes in heavy armor and ice magic, a Cryo Knight. He's to escape the bad people trying to use travelers, people who from other worlds that respawn after death, like himself, to gain power and territory. And that's essentially what the core of the story is. After the 20% mark, there are a lot more game mechanics that are used to describe the power progression of the main character and of the travelers. Though I'll note that there are sometimes a very distinct lack of details for semblance, and it's kind of purposeful. You can tell in the story, like the author may have had them there originally and took them out, or they weren't part of it at all originally. Like actual numbers showing the amount of XP gained from killing monsters or completing quests. Additionally, the main character's class wasn't something he got to choose, but is something that kind of awakened in him. And those two elements in particular kind of made the story feel a little, I don't want to say forced, but planned out. Like the progression in the story wasn't mechanic driven, the same way it is in kind of a video game, rather story driven. Like the points of progression aligned with where the main character needed to be to overcome a particular problem or challenge, instead of it being like he worked really hard and whatever challenges face at his particular level or power set have to be overcome without logically and complexly, and it just kind of felt like his power progression was already kind of determined in advance before some of the mechanics were necessarily in place. Those predominant. That's beyond those particular points. There's lots of notifications, lots of levels, lots of powers, lots of gamer mentalities in the story. So this is definitely a game at LitRPG. It's just those two particular points in particular were things that stuck in my mind. Like, oh, this is kind of a choice. And that's perfectly fine. I respect that choice. But for me, it kind of took away from the elements of the story that of LitRPG, to say, that I really enjoy, like the crunchy detail of the ability to kind of see into the game mechanics of the story and kind of make my own character. And that doesn't necessarily exist in the same way it does in other stories. In the particular story world, again, when the characters come into this world, they are kind of just saddled with the class. It's not really of a choosing. It's kind of an awakening, which was more in line of like a fantasy story where a main hero character is awakened. His powers are awakened, instead of him making a distinctive choice like a gamer, like, oh, making a contract that I want to be a ranger or a warrior, whatever the case is. And that's just a storytelling choice. Other aspects of the story are really entertaining. The story is good on the whole. Again, good action, good adventure, good introducing to powers. Again, it's that deliberate decision to minimize some of these numerical details was something that took some my enjoyment away from the story. There we go. Get a score of 7.2 out of 10. Still a good score, just not like the best of the show. That's Cryo Knight, a fantasy LitRPG story with a score of 7.2 out of 10. Okay, next up is a review of The Mechanical Raptor by guest reviewer Charles Dean. Charles Dean is an author of LitRPG author himself. He written the War Eternity series, the Merchant of Tikva, the Bathrobe Knight, to name a few, and the Heroic Villain as well. So he's a well-respected author in the genre, and he was nice enough to write up a review for the particular book that I wrote. I don't generally review my own novels, so he was nice enough to volunteer to kind of do this. Here is his review. He says, so I'm going to review the book right now. The Mechanical Raptor by Ramon Mejia. I want to be upfront and honest with the guys going into this. I freaking love my brown brother Ramon. He's an amazing guy, and I consider him one of my closest friends. So just as, kernel of just take this review with a little bit of salt. This review may be biased. That said, I have a ton of friends, and you probably don't see me doing any if any reviews at all. So let me first talk about Repair. The story is going to center around the backbone growth type of arc that I think most of us really enjoy. The payoff is there. The development is there. If you are reading this not as a LitRPG fan, but just for the MC story, you can probably glaze over the parts I love the most and still have a good time. It is, after all, at its heart, a good buddy-buddy story that has us watch a doormat kind of morph into a bit more of a statue of confidence. That said, if you're reading this for the good buddy-buddy story part, you're kind of missing out. This is a crafting book after all. I want to break down exactly how and what the crafting does in this review, but I think that would ultimately take a lot of the fun out of the book. Instead, I'm going to say that the crafting system as a whole was interesting and a bit novel in many ways I wasn't expecting. There was also a ton of it in the book. You literally can't seem to go more than a chapter without running into it. It's not the type of crafting I would normally find in books either, because the main character himself is a machine, and a lot of his class quests are built around the system. I want to say more, but I don't. You should really read this. I would definitely recommend it for the type like me who enjoy the growth set in Dungeon Core books, not just crafting books, as the combination of the main character's methodology and use of crafting, plus how he really advances in power did, to me at least, feel a bit Dungeon Core-ish. It's hard to explain. Anyways, I hope you enjoyed the book. Solid 7.6 out of 10. This rating is just a joke, Ramon. I love the book. Go read it. So there you go. I'm actually keeping that review score. I think that's pretty fair. And like I said, Charles Dean is, he might be a friend of mine, but he's also rather, he's super critical. He's one of the most critical and honest dudes I know. So if you didn't like the book, he would absolutely say, he would say, this stinks, Ramon. Go find a different job. So there you go. Okay, that's it, folks. That's the end of the show. Thank you very much for listening, for watching, for hanging out with us this week on the LitRPG podcast. This week, if you want to help support the podcast in any way, shape, or form, you can find out, you can just go buy the book, Mechanical Crafter. Go read it. It's on Kindle Unlimited. It's free for you. If you want to just check it out, scroll through it, see if you enjoy it. If you don't, that's perfectly fine. If you do like it, though, please leave a review so that other people can find it on Amazon, because the more reviews it gets, the more Amazon will tend to show it to other people and promote it. And so that's definitely going to help support me and the podcast. So thank you very much. Until we can hang out again, folks, remember to go read some LitRPG. Goodbye, everybody.